Okay, brain, calm down. Yes, I am talking to myself on camera, again. But wait, before you assume it's a problem, here's the twist. Research shows self-talk is extremely common across ages, and lab studies show it can shift focus, stress chemistry, and performance. So if you've ever whispered, "You got this," before a presentation, you're not strange. You're literally rewiring your brain chemistry. You can trigger fast shifts in stress responses and, with consistent practice, reshape neural circuits over weeks. The real question is, are you using your inner voice to give you power or to sabotage you? In this video, we'll explain how that voice affects attention, hormones, and how to use it strategically, without drowning in cliches. Which leads us to the puzzle. If thoughts are already silent and efficient, why does the brain sometimes push us to say them out loud? Why do we even talk to ourselves? To answer that, we need to look at the difference between thoughts that stay quiet in your head and the ones that spill out of your mouth. Psychologists describe two forms: inner self-talk, the silent voice you use to rehearse a conversation, plan what to cook for dinner, or run through a checklist while driving, and outer self-talk, when you actually say those thoughts aloud. On the surface, the two seem redundant, but the brain doesn't treat them the same way. Silent inner speech is quick and flexible, perfect for simulating different outcomes or floating between options. When those words are spoken out loud, though, different systems kick in. Saying instructions aloud recruits language production and auditory perception pathways, and research shows this can improve task accuracy and response speed. In other words, by attaching sound to thought, you anchor a fleeting idea into something your brain handles as more concrete. That shift becomes especially useful when your attention risks slipping. Imagine heading out the door and softly repeating, "Keys, keys, keys." Naming the item pulls your eyes toward it faster, guiding your visual search much the way a written note might. A whispered directive carries more weight than letting the thought simply pass by in silence. This isn't a new trick. The psychologist Lev Vygotsky argued that children first vocalize their private speech while learning to connect thoughts with language, and adults return to the same strategy when extra control is needed. The habit persists because it works. Spoken words steady focus when silent thought alone falters. So while talking to yourself might look odd, the reality is that it's often your brain strengthening the link between intention and action. Out loud cues give structure to messy thoughts, and they can transform stress or uncertainty into step-by-step instruction. But not all self-talk is equally effective, and some of it can even steer you in the wrong direction. What kind of self-talk helps, and when does it backfire? We're about to find out. The myth of madness. Why does a simple habit like speaking words under your breath so often get misread as a signal that something's wrong? The answer lies less in psychology and more in the cultural scripts we inherit. For generations, muttering aloud has been coded as a sign of unraveling, showing up in films, jokes, and everyday judgments. Those scripts built a stigma that still lingers today. But step outside that lens, and the science tells a different story. Self-directed speech is not only normal, but usually functional. From a scientific perspective, talking to yourself is practically universal. Children develop private speech as a way to connect words and thought, and adults continue the habit to focus, plan, and regulate emotion. Far from being a flaw, it's a tool that keeps cognition on track. Rehearsing instructions under your breath, or quietly saying "stay calm" before a tough interaction, reflects active effort at self-regulation. This is how the brain stabilizes itself, not how it loses its grip. Yet the old images remain sticky. Someone quietly rehearsing a talk in a grocery aisle may look odd to bystanders, but really, they're just preparing for performance in a public space. The behavior hasn't changed. Our interpretation of it has. Seeing it through a cultural frame that equates composure with silence makes the action appear out of place. Different traditions, however, reframe self-talk as perfectly expected. Mantra recitation, prayer, and coached affirmations all normalize speaking inner dialogue aloud. The act itself is neutral. It's cultural context that makes it strange or acceptable. This is why stigma persists, not because the action is rare or dangerous, but because moments of visible self-talk usually take place under stress, when someone needs extra focus. Listeners may mark it as unusual, but the mechanics driving it are routine. Out-loud cues recruit motor and auditory systems, anchoring thought and making it easier to follow through. What seems eccentric is simply the brain leaning on an efficient, built-in strategy. There's one important clarification, though. If the words you hear don't feel like your own thoughts, if they arrive as external voices, as if someone else is speaking, that's different. Clinicians separate those experiences from ordinary self-talk. In cases of hallucinations or disconnection from reality, professional guidance is important. But for the vast majority of people, self-talk is harmless, practical, and even beneficial. Knowing this might ease the quiet embarrassment many people feel when they catch themselves muttering aloud. Have you ever looked around, embarrassed to murmur an instruction before leaving the house? Drop a one-line confession in the comments, no judgment. Sharing those tiny moments helps replace stigma with recognition of just how common the behavior really is. Public feedback loops often reinforce old myths. Media still relies on the shorthand of the muttering loner to suggest a character is unstable, even as sports coaches, therapists, and educators teach positive self-talk openly. The contradiction is striking. The same verbal habit that's dramatized as instability on screen is promoted as high-performance strategy elsewhere. Which version is true depends mostly on how we choose to frame the act. If we stop attaching the cultural baggage, what remains is clear. Almost everyone generates internal dialogue. Speaking it aloud, at the right moments, strengthens attention and decision-making. Far from being a red flag, these murmurs are maintenance routines for the mind, keeping cognition aligned with intention. Talking to yourself is not a marker of madness. It's a marker of functioning control systems, doing exactly what they evolved to do. The next time you notice your own whisper or mutter, take it less as a quirk and more as proof that your brain is monitoring itself in real time. The act of putting thought into sound isn't a breakdown. It's a sign that cognition and language are working together to guide you forward. And this habit doesn't just signal stability, it can also sharpen performance when it matters most. When the inner voice boosts performance, watch an athlete right before a decisive play, and you might notice something easy to miss. A quiet phrase repeated under the breath. A tennis player before serving, a sprinter in the blocks, or a basketball player setting up for free throws. Many whisper a cue word or short instruction like steady or follow through. These aren't random habits. They're purposeful, evidence-based strategies that shape attention and improve execution under stress. Researchers studying high-pressure performance have shown that these brief utterances act as tools, not tics, helping focus the mind when it matters most. The basic mechanism is straightforward. When a task is challenging, your brain is flooded with competing signals: bodily tension, crowd noise, and intrusive thoughts. A crisp phrase brings attention back to a single target. Speaking it out loud makes the instruction stronger, because you're engaging both speech and hearing. That dual signal reinforces intention more effectively than silent thought. One experiment even showed that people identifying shapes or colors on a screen reacted faster and with fewer mistakes when they read the cues out loud instead of just keeping them in their heads. Saying the word made the focus stick. Athletes aren't alone here. Weightlifters repeating, drive up, make lifts more precise. Runners using rhythmic words keep stride and breathing in sync. Even outside sports, professionals rely on the same principle. Surgeons often verbalize steps during long operations. Pilots recite checklists aloud even when they already know them by heart. These routines reduce error by turning fleeting plans into strong sensory markers that are less likely to be lost under pressure. The spoken step becomes a stabilizer, ensuring crucial actions don't slip away when stress rises. At the core is working memory, the mental scratchpad that holds what you're doing right now. The problem is, that scratchpad is tiny, and stress fills it quickly. Speaking an instruction out loud lightens the load. Instead of keeping an instruction in a fragile inner loop, you externalize it through sound. Hearing your own words provides an extra anchor. Put simply, saying a step out loud turns a fleeting thought into a stronger, multi-sensory signal, so you're less likely to drop it under pressure. These routines are far from trivial. Meta-analyses in sports science show that structured self-talk interventions can raise performance measures by low double-digit percentages. That kind of margin often separates a clean result from a costly error. The advantage is more than psychological comfort. It's a measurable shift in how reliably actions get executed. An important detail is the kind of phrase you choose. Instructional cues, words aimed at form or process like elbow up or keep low, work especially well when precision matters. Motivational cues, short pushes like stay with it or last one, tend to help during endurance efforts or moments of fatigue. The two categories rely on different brain systems. Instructional talk engages planning and motor control regions, while motivational talk activates reward and emotional networks. That's why specificity matters. Vague muttering usually backfires, while a concrete, goal-directed phrase translates into better execution. So how can you apply this? A simple guideline is to pick a short, precise cue matched to the challenge. If you need accuracy, a two-word instruction like smooth release steadies technique. If you need endurance, something like stay strong boosts persistence. Speak it once or twice before action, rather than letting words scatter into rambling. Athletes who train with self-talk often build small libraries of personalized cue words adapted to each part of their performance. You can do the same for study, work, or daily tasks. Think about problem solving. People tackling puzzles or memory games perform better when narrating their steps. Instead of silently weighing options, a person might whisper, "next corner," or "try this path." The spoken words reduce errors by keeping track of each piece of the task more reliably than thought alone. The same applies to complex reading or studying. Saying definitions or steps aloud reinforces them and reduces mind wandering. Another useful effect is that short cues counter mental drift. Stress pulls attention to outcome worries or self-criticism, but a repeated phrase pulls focus back to what's actionable now. This is especially powerful in preventing choking, when overthinking ruins automatic skills. A golfer anchoring their swing with a two-word mantra signals the brain to stay present with rhythm instead of spiraling into anxious checks of form. Across settings, the tether of a pre-selected cue word keeps stray thoughts from taking control. And the benefits don't stop at elite performance. Anyone giving a class presentation can stabilize recall by softly rehearsing a key phrase beforehand. Anyone studying dense text can prevent attention from slipping by reading the main concept aloud. A professional walking into a high-stakes meeting can use a quiet word like clear points to reinforce delivery. These small practices work because your brain reacts strongly to your own voice, even in whispers, turning an intention into something more concrete. It's also worth noting what fails. Telling yourself, "don't mess up," keeps the brain focused on the mistake you fear. Negative phrasing saps resources instead of sharpening them. Adjusting wording to emphasize the positive process, steady hand instead of don't shake, redirects attention toward what you want, not what you're trying to avoid. This shift echoes what many coaches and psychologists teach. Clear, instructional, positive wording creates better outcomes than cautionary muttering. All of this makes directed self-talk a practical tool most people overlook. The whispered phrases you see athletes use are not nervous tics. They are high-efficiency strategies rooted in cognitive science, effective not only in stadiums and operating rooms, but also in classrooms, offices, and daily routines. The trick is to be deliberate. Choose specific, purposeful words tied to the task, and say them clearly enough to hear yourself. Once you recognize the underlying mechanism, it becomes clear how simple speech can reliably improve action. Structured, intentional self-talk increases accuracy, blocks out distractions, sustains focus, and keeps decision-making sharp under time pressure. It's one of the few tools you can carry with you everywhere, needing nothing but your own voice. And while the benefits are immediate for performance, the influence doesn't stop there. What you say to yourself, and how you say it, touches deeper systems in the body that extend beyond focus and accuracy. Those small spoken cues may also alter hidden processes beneath the surface, shaping not just attention, but the chemistry of stress and motivation itself. Rewiring brain chemistry. Can the words you direct toward yourself really shift the balance of your brain chemistry? It sounds unlikely at first. How could a private phrase carry the weight of biology? Yet neuroscience shows again and again that patterns of self-talk have measurable effects on the body's stress systems, reward pathways, and focus networks. The brain does not treat inner dialogue as background noise. It treats it as signal, and depending on the tone and content, that signal can either amplify stress or prime resilience. Researchers often focus on cortisol because it acts like a first responder in stress situations. When negative self-talk floods a difficult moment, phrases like, "I can't handle this," the body treats the words like a fresh threat. Cortisol rises higher than if you faced the stressor in silence, narrowing perception and disrupting memory. By contrast, constructive self-talk produces the opposite shift, redirecting inner phrases toward control, slow down, or focus on the first step. Keeps cortisol spikes shorter and less intense. This biochemical difference changes not only physiology, but also felt experience. Steadier heart rate, clearer thought, calmer perception. Dopamine adds another layer. This chemical powers motivation and the drive to continue when situations are effortful. Self-criticism dampens dopamine signaling, often leading to sluggishness or avoidance. Encouraging self-instruction primes the system to engage, pushing effort forward instead of pulling it back. This is why process-focused cues like next step keep momentum alive. The circuits activated by that style of phrasing overlap, with left prefrontal regions linked to approach motivation, reward, and adaptive persistence. Imaging studies make these changes visible. In controlled experiments, supportive self-talk increases activation in the prefrontal cortex, the brain's planning and self-regulation hub, while reducing activity in the amygdala, the alarm system that governs fear and reactivity. Negative self-talk flips the pattern. The amygdala lights up, pulling blood flow away from rational control systems and triggering tunnel vision alongside a heightened sense of threat. These patterns explain why harsh language leaves people not just emotionally drained, but physically tense and mentally inflexible. Importantly, these effects play out on two different timelines. Immediate changes, like reductions in cortisol or stabilizations in heart rate, can occur within minutes when you swap negative wording for constructive phrasing. Longer-term rewiring requires repetition. Consistent practice of optimized self-talk for even 10 minutes daily has been shown to shift neural activation patterns within 4 to 6 weeks. Over 3 to 6 months, these practice patterns can stabilize into stronger, more resilient circuits shaped by neuroplasticity. In other words, words can adjust chemistry almost instantly, and they can gradually reshape connectivity if you use them deliberately over time. Note, blanket affirmations like, "I am amazing," or "everything will be perfect," don't always deliver these benefits. For people with very low self-esteem, such phrases often feel untrue and can even backfire, heightening self-doubt. Neuroscience research supports a more grounded approach. Use process-focused, specific phrases that feel plausible. Telling yourself breathe evenly, or write one paragraph, creates physiological follow-through, while identity-only praise tends to drift without the same impact. That distinction illustrates why not all positive words are equally potent. The brain responds best to language tied to action, especially when stress is high. Phrases that shape breathing, pace, or sequence can influence physiological systems directly. In contrast, vague cheerleading might lift mood for a moment, but lacks depth of effect. Framing matters. Constructive dialogue gives the nervous system precise cues, whereas empty slogans often do little to change chemical cascades. This becomes clear in real-world performance. Picture two speakers before a presentation. One mutters, "I'm going to screw this up," and the result is rapid cortisol elevation, memory disruption, and shaky delivery. Another repeats, "Keep your pace, steady voice." Cortisol rises less, dopamine supports action, and working memory stays intact. Both started equally anxious, but their chemistry diverged based on internal phrasing. The change isn't just psychological. It's a shift in how stress response systems allocate resources during pressure. Over time, these patterns can shift baseline responses. Persistent negative chatter sensitizes the nervous system, so stress reactions arrive faster and with higher intensity in future situations. Consistently constructive self-talk does the reverse. It trains calmer physiology by priming the brain for regulation before stress even appears. This explains why some people appear resilient despite similar circumstances. They have conditioned their biological systems with language habits that reinforce steadiness. Cognitive flexibility is another domain affected by self-talk. Studies have shown that encouraging, adaptive inner speech increases activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, a region vital for switching perspectives and considering multiple solutions. Laboratory participants who practiced constructive phrases improved creative problem-solving by close to 30% compared with those using critical language. Negative patterns narrow perception. Supportive scripts broaden it, giving the brain permission to explore alternatives rather than looping through ruminations. Self-talk's interaction with emotional health is equally striking. Chronic negative inner language activates depression-related circuits and strengthens rumination networks, keeping attention locked on what went wrong. Strategic constructive phrasing counteracts these patterns, reducing depressive activation while strengthening prefrontal control over emotional reactivity. Within weeks of consistent practice, many participants in intervention studies show shifts toward more balanced neural activity. underscoring that changing self-dialogue is a low-cost but biologically potent intervention. Practical application comes down to structure. Instead of repeating "don't fail," which primes the mind with the word fail, try phrasing that targets the process. Steady breathing, focus on first line, keep the movement smooth. Each of these taps directly into systems the body can act upon. They guide physiology while reducing ambiguity. Over time, compiling a short library of such personalized, process-focused cues gives you a set of reliable scripts to fall back on under stress. Scripts that consistently regulate chemistry toward clarity. To illustrate the point, consider recovery states. People who encouraged themselves throughout difficult tasks often reported not only better performance, but also greater satisfaction afterward. Supportive phrasing seems to amplify dopamine's reward signal, making the experience of completion itself more satisfying. Negative phrasing blunts this effect, leaving effort unrewarding and reducing willingness to attempt again. The chemistry, in other words, sets the foundation for resilience loops or avoidance loops. The difference lies in whether you reinforce with constructive words or dismantle with harsh ones. All of this positions self-talk, not just as a psychological aid, but as a kind of biological instruction manual. Words direct hormonal surges, guide neurotransmitter release, and tune the balance between stress networks and control networks. Some adjustments surface in minutes, some embed across months, but together they nudge the nervous system either toward reactivity or regulation. Unlike medication or external tools, self-talk requires no resources other than attention and repetition. It is one of the most direct routes you have to influence your own internal chemistry. The takeaway is clear. Every private phrase carries weight, and the nervous system treats those words as cues. When language is critical or vague, chemistry tilts toward cortisol-heavy vigilance and narrowed thought. When phrasing is constructive and tethered to process, chemistry trims stress, steadies focus, and enhances flexibility. Over time, repetition lays down lasting neural tracks, making these reactions more automatic. Self-talk isn't just mental rehearsal. It is a biological tuning system embedded within everyday language. And while this section has focused on the chemical and structural shifts caused by different kinds of inner dialogue, one more wrinkle changes the equation even further. The form of the words, the grammatical perspective you choose, alters how much distance or closeness you feel to a challenge. Some phrases work because they sound like instructions. Others work because they sound like advice from someone else. That variation opens up another layer of control in how inner dialogue shapes stress and performance. First-person versus third-person power. Why does saying, "I can do this," feel different from saying, "You can do this, Sarah," or "Come on, Michael, you've got this"? At first glance, it seems like a minor grammatical shift, but studies in psychology and neuroscience show it matters. First-person self-talk and third-person self-talk do not land in the same way. Each alters how much emotion is attached to your words and how your brain handles pressure. That small change in phrasing can make the difference between feeling swallowed by stress or steady enough to act. Think about how you encourage a friend before an important moment. You wouldn't look them in the eyes and say, "I can do this." You'd almost certainly say, "You can do this," or use their name. "Ella, you've got it." That external framing makes it sound like guided advice rather than self-doubt. Researchers call this self-distancing. Speaking in the third person adds a layer of space between you and the raw emotion, and that distance helps regulate how intensely the feelings hit. It is one of the simplest ways to talk to yourself like a coach instead of a panicked teammate. The brain reflects this separation. Third-person phrasing creates self-distancing, which reduces limbic, amygdala, reactivity, and engages perspective-taking regions, making you calmer and more objective. Imaging has shown that people who use their own name or you during stressful tasks activate circuits that help with regulation and perspective. The brain isn't just muting threat, it's simultaneously strengthening regions that evaluate, reframe, and plan. Saying to yourself, "You'll be fine, Daniel," does more than sound reassuring. It prompts calmer, clearer processing when pressure is high. In contrast, first-person phrasing, "I can handle this," keeps you close to the core of the emotion. That is not always a disadvantage. Sometimes being inside the moment is exactly what helps you dig deep. Athletes, lifters, or runners often prefer, "I've got this," because it feels personal and embodied. Instead of stepping back, they are stepping into the action, owning it fully. That immediacy can generate the raw push needed to move through fatigue or tackle effort that feels beyond reach. So which one works best? It depends on what the situation demands. When your body needs energy and persistence, first-person talk fuels engagement. But when you need calm, focus, and measured control, third-person phrasing gives the advantage. Use first-person for raw, short-term motivational pushes. Use third-person, or your own name, when you need emotional distance and better decision-making under stress. This is not about one style being always superior. Research consistently shows they are situational tools. Studies have tested how these phrasing shifts influence stress responses in ordinary life. In one experiment, participants reflected on stressful personal memories while using either first or third-person phrasing. The third-person group reported less anxiety, and their physiological markers of stress were lower. In another study, people preparing for a nerve-wracking public speech gave themselves pep talks. Those who used their name and you displayed calmer delivery, and neutral observers rated them as more composed compared with peers relying on first-person statements. Even subtle shifts in pronoun use produced visible differences in performance. What seems to be happening is this: when people lock into first person, everything feels like it is happening directly to me. That heightens the sense of threat. Switching to you, or inserting your own name, breaks the frame. Instead of drowning in the raw emotion, you step into the role of advisor, shrinking the weight of the moment. For example, "I'm going to blow this" grips the nervous system differently than "You're nervous right now, but you'll be okay." Both admit the nerves, but only the second creates distance that tempers their control. That distance also improves problem solving. When you treat yourself more like a character than a direct participant, you gain perspective. Broader thinking comes into play. Rumination gives way to options. In high-stakes moments where clear action matters, that subtle linguistic tweak leads to sharper decisions. The striking part is how immediate the effect can be. You don't need weeks of rehearsal. Consciously shifting pronouns in the middle of stress can change the tone of your thinking on the spot. Of course, this doesn't make first-person self-talk obsolete. It still matters for drive. During physical exertion, repeating, "I can do this" strengthens identity with the action, reinforcing persistence. In those contexts, repeating your own name might sound oddly detached and less motivating. The usefulness depends on the state you want: full engagement or measured regulation. The skill is learning to match the form of speech to the type of effort required. Criticism adds another layer. When you criticize yourself in first person, "I'm terrible at this," the brain receives it as a direct personal threat. That lights up the amygdala, dumping cortisol and pulling metabolic resources away from the prefrontal cortex, the area you need to plan and decide. You end up in a loop where clear thinking collapses right when you most need it. By rephrasing into third person, you made a mistake, but you can fix it. You strike a different note. The responsibility is still there, but now it's framed as advice instead of attack. That makes it easier to act on without spiraling deeper into stress. Put simply, first-person phrases tie you directly into the effort of the moment. Third-person phrases act like a stabilizer, giving you clarity when your emotions threaten to overwhelm. I drives persistence. Name, or you, reduces anxiety and keeps decision-making sharp. Both matter, but the key is knowing when to switch. Here's a quick way to experience the difference. Try both right now. Say, "I can do this," and then try, "Your name, you can do this." Notice which one feels grounding and which fires up energy. Experiment with that shift the next time you face something stressful. The contrast is often immediate. Everyday examples make this clear. Before an interview, you might say, "You're ready for this, Maya. Just focus on the first question." That phrasing creates space from the anxiety and steadies delivery. In training, when you feel your body wanting to quit, switch to, "I can push through one more set." That style tightens the connection between identity and effort. The choice of pronoun becomes a small control lever for navigating stress or fatigue. Across cultures and contexts, similar techniques appear. Coaches often use names instead of pronouns to rally athletes, not only because it personalizes encouragement, but also because it creates just enough separation to sound like prompted advice rather than inner spin. Parents, teachers, and therapists often encourage children to name themselves as a way of calming down or solving a problem. The same circuit applies. Adding a name reframes the perspective. Research also shows this doesn't require elaborate rituals or lengthy practice. Even minimal shifts in framing, carried out deliberately, change brain state. The flexibility of the habit means it can be applied quickly in boardrooms, classrooms, hospitals, or even at home during daily stresses. Over time, you can observe patterns about when I drives results and when you steadies things. That awareness alone gives you a finer toolset for managing both motivation and composure. So while it looks like a simple word swap, first-person versus third-person phrasing changes the balance of motivation, objectivity, and emotional charge. Both are useful, but the strength lies in matching one to the context. Learn to recognize when you need raw determination and when you need composure. Then pull the language lever that fits the moment. But language can also work against you. The voice in your head is not always a supportive coach. Sometimes it turns critical, repetitious, even punishing, and those words carry weight of their own. What happens when the inner dialogue shifts from steadying or motivating into constant attack? That question takes us into a very different side of self-talk. The dark side of self-talk. Sometimes the voice inside isn't a coach at all, it's a critic. Instead of offering calm focus or short, supportive cues, it circles harsh judgments, magnifies small mistakes, and rehearses failures before they even happen. At first glance, that might seem trivial, because after all, they're just thoughts. But the nervous system doesn't actually treat them as harmless. Internal criticism activates the same threat circuits that an external insult would. The body responds as if the danger were real, shifting chemistry, draining focus, and narrowing perception. This is where self-talk tips toward its darker side. Repetitive self-criticism triggers the brain's threat system, particularly the amygdala, which signals alarm. When that system switches on, blood and energy shift away from the prefrontal cortex, the part needed for problem-solving and flexible thinking, toward reactivity and muscle tension. At the same time, rumination takes hold. Thought loops circle endlessly without resolution, hijacking mental capacity. Studies show rumination can reduce working memory substantially, in some cases approaching a 40% loss of mental bandwidth needed for decision-making. That depletion is why negative self-talk doesn't just sting emotionally. It actively erodes your ability to think clearly and judge situations accurately. The wasted effort is part of what makes rumination so draining. The mind feels busy, as though it's solving a problem, yet nothing moves forward. The same words keep circling while stress hormones remain high, reinforcing the spiral. Left unchecked, this cycle fuels anxiety during the day and restless overanalysis at night. People can spend hours replaying one event or predicting failures that never come, only to feel more exhausted and less capable by morning. The loop convinces them they are preparing, when in reality they are only deepening the trap. This inner critic also sabotages motivation. Research suggests constant self-criticism doesn't improve performance, but lowers the willingness to even attempt. If you hear, "I always screw this up," before starting a project, mistakes become proof of that script. Instead of adapting, you may retreat, abandoning effort altogether. Over time, success itself can be blunted because the critic reframes it as luck or temporary. The result is self-sabotage. Projects delayed, risks avoided, and growth bottled up because the inner voice frames failure as inevitable. Part of the damage stems from cognitive distortions, built-in errors of thought that appear in negative self-talk. Catastrophizing makes one small mistake feel catastrophic. Overgeneralizing maps one flaw onto your entire identity. All-or-nothing thinking paints outcomes as total disaster or total success, leaving no middle ground. Jumping to conclusions convinces you of failure without evidence. Each of these distortions drains perspective and makes ordinary setbacks feel permanent. In a school setting, it means a single bad grade feels like proof of incompetence. At work, it means one critical comment overshadows months of progress. The distortion becomes the lens through which every experience is filtered. Shame is often what binds negative self-talk together. Instead of seeing a mistake as situational, the inner critic makes it evidence of who you are. The thought becomes not, "I failed at this task," but "I am a failure." That shift in framing shrinks your willingness to take on challenges unless you're guaranteed success. In daily life, this creates a narrowing of possibilities. People stop applying for jobs, avoid social opportunities, or settle into small, safe routines where their critic won't be triggered. Rather than building resilience, the cycle builds avoidance, making the world feel smaller. Interrupting this cycle requires practical tools. One of the most widely studied approaches is cognitive behavioral therapy, which targets negative self-talk as both cause and consequence. At its core is cognitive restructuring, identifying distorted thoughts, questioning their accuracy, and replacing them with more balanced versions. The goal isn't to paste over pain with false positivity, but to move phrases closer to reality. Research shows that consistent restructuring practice changes brain patterns within 4 to 6 weeks, reducing exaggerated threat responses and strengthening regulatory control. The mind literally relearns to quiet its alarm system while restoring executive function. A simple framework from clinical psychology captures this process well. Name it, frame it, rewire it. First, name the critic. Notice the voice and label it so that it becomes distinct from your whole identity. Second, frame the thought by asking what it is trying to protect. Often criticism is a misguided attempt at safety. Third, rewire by replacing the distortion with a supportive but realistic alternative. For example, "I'm hopeless at this" can be reframed into "this attempt didn't work, but I can adjust next time." That 3-step sequence creates both awareness and replacement, weakening the old circuit while strengthening a healthier alternative. Self-compassion offers another layer of repair. Instead of speaking to yourself like a harsh drill sergeant, imagine addressing a friend facing the same difficulty. Studies show that people who practice self-compassion bounce back faster after mistakes, with less anxiety and less rumination. It's not indulgence. It's a way of conserving energy for actual problem-solving instead of sinking it into self-punishment. Combining self-compassion with mindfulness makes this even stronger. By observing thoughts without fusing with them, you create a pause in which to decide whether to engage. That split second of awareness is often the difference between spiraling into a loop and shifting toward constructive alternatives. Neuroplasticity is what makes any of these approaches effective. Thoughts repeated daily wire and rewire circuits. A critic that has been reinforced for years feels real, but it is not permanent. Consistent new patterns create new neural tracks, weakening old ones. With weeks of steady practice, language habits shift perception and stress responses measurably. What first feels artificial, swapping, "I always fail, for this time was hard, but I can try again," over time begins to feel natural, with emotional weight to match. Some worry that softening the inner voice lowers ambition. The data say otherwise. Constant self-criticism reduces persistence because failure is too punishing. Practicing balanced or compassionate self-talk makes retrying less threatening, so effort continues longer. In research, supportive self-talk consistently predicts more perseverance and improved outcomes compared to harsh styles. In this light, self-kindness is not coddling, but an engine of resilience, allowing high standards to be pursued without self-destruction. Awareness is the first step. Many people don't realize how often they repeat toxic phrases until they begin tracking them. Simply noting the words can shift your relationship with them, moving from absorption to observation. From that vantage point, distortion becomes recognizable, and replacement becomes possible. With repetition, even ingrained critics lose dominance. What once felt like an unchangeable personality trait is revealed as a habit that can be rewired. A short example illustrates this. Imagine thinking, "I always fail presentations." Following the 3-step method, you first name the thought, acknowledge it as the critic's phrase. Then you frame it, recognize the fear behind it, perhaps the desire to avoid embarrassment. Finally, you rewire it into something more balanced. "Last time was shaky, but I prepared more carefully today." That shift doesn't erase pressure, but it steers chemistry and focus away from threat mode toward regulation. Over weeks, these alternative scripts reshape how your nervous system responds, making performance steadier and less draining. Of course, there are limits. If self-talk becomes so negative that it dominates daily life, interferes with functioning, or feels immersive and uncontrollable, the safest step is to consult a qualified mental health professional. Therapy provides structured tools for challenging entrenched thought patterns and support in applying techniques that can be difficult to maintain alone. Seeking help when the critic overtakes daily functioning is not weakness, but responsible care, the same way you would seek treatment for a recurring pain that limits movement. The darker side of inner dialogue shows how powerful words can be when turned against the self. They activate threat, drain working memory, erode motivation, and shrink a person's sense of possibility. Yet the same malleability that makes language harmful also makes it a lever for change. Naming distortions, practicing structured reframing, and adding compassion rewire the nervous system away from alarm and towards steadiness. That shift frees energy for growth instead of loops. But inner dialogue does not exist in a vacuum. What counts as criticism or self-support is shaped by the environment in which a person learns to talk at all. To understand how people relate to their inner voices, it helps to see that the style of self-talk is not universal. Factors like upbringing, tradition, and cultural context influence how words are spoken internally and externally, and how acceptable, or strange, different styles of self-address may appear. Across cultures, different voices. Not everyone's inner voice sounds the same, and culture plays a large role in shaping how people use self-talk. While the ability to generate private speech is universal, the way it appears in daily life differs across communities. Anthropology and psychology research shows that expression of inner dialogue, whether spoken aloud or kept silent, often reflects cultural values about independence, harmony, and how much attention should be drawn to the self. In cultures that emphasize individualism, such as many Western societies, open self-directed speech is common and often accepted as ordinary. Self-talk works here as a tool for personal guidance, motivation, or problem-solving. People are encouraged to assert themselves and pursue individual goals, so speaking out phrases like, "I can handle this," or "one more step," fits within the cultural norm. The practice supports autonomy and reinforces the idea that success is achieved through personal effort. By contrast, in collectivist cultures that prioritize harmony and interdependence, self-talk isn't less common, but it tends to be less visible. Words are often rehearsed silently rather than spoken aloud, because calling attention to oneself may feel out of place. When vocal expression does occur, it often happens in shared forms, communal chanting, group affirmations, or ritual recitations, where the boundary between private and public language is deliberately blurred. Such settings highlight group values and signal connection, rather than personal display. Cross-cultural psychology underscores these distinctions with concrete evidence. For example, studies of parents in different societies show they vary in how much emotion language they use when talking with children about past experiences. Those differences affect how children later talk to themselves about feelings and actions. This points to a broader principle. Self-talk is universal, but the frequency, content, and style are shaped by the social rules and norms a person grows up with. Spiritual traditions offer some of the clearest examples of how culture integrates self-talk. In Buddhist practice, repeating mantras like Om Mani Padme Hum is thought to cultivate compassion and steady the mind. The words are spoken by individuals, but carry shared cultural meaning, reinforcing both personal focus and group identity. Christian traditions also use repetition, reciting familiar prayers or affirmations in services. That doubles as inward dialogue shaping comfort, faith, and calm. Here prayer is not only communication with a higher power, but also structured self-talk calibrated by tradition. Many traditions around the world adopt similar approaches. Dhikr in Islamic contexts, mantras in Hindu practice, or affirmations in indigenous ceremonies. These examples show how societies channel the regulatory power of self-talk into rituals that strengthen collective identity. The repetition provides emotional regulation, while also situating the self within a broader community. Put simply, what looks like prayer, chanting, or recitation is also a cultural form of guided inner dialogue. Although these forms differ in tone and setting, the core function of language as self-regulation remains. In work settings, this can mean that someone raised in an individualistic environment may whisper motivational cues before a presentation, while someone from a collectivist background may rehearse silently to align their message with group goals. Both steady nerves and sharpen focus. The outward style reflects only what is considered socially appropriate. The cultural lens also influences self-reflection. In independence-oriented contexts, inner speech often centers on improving personal skill and achievement. Next time I'll prepare better. In interdependent cultures, inner dialogue more often notes group impact. This outcome affected everyone. I should find a way to help us recover. Neither is superior, but each shows how cultural frameworks filter the same brain mechanism into different themes. Whose voice is heard internally also differs. In cultures focused on autonomy, self-talk tends to sound like one's own will and ambitions guiding action. In interdependent contexts, inner dialogue more often echoes voices of elders, parents, and community expectations, showing how guidance from others becomes woven into private speech. Culture, therefore, doesn't just shape the style of expression, it shapes the very content of the inner voice. One key insight is that there is no single correct way to practice self-talk. What matters is its function, whether the words help regulate stress, clarify focus, or reinforce connection. For people in cultures that value discretion and silence, effective self-talk can take the form of private cues or short rituals repeated quietly. Ritualized chants and group practices show that volume and visibility are flexible. The essential point is that inner speech, however expressed, serves as a tool for both stability and meaning. Recognizing these cultural variations allows us to see self-talk not as eccentric or uniform, but as adaptable. Language inside the mind organizes thought and stabilizes emotion in all societies. The outward pattern simply reflects shared values. Independence in some places, harmony in others, spirituality in many. Taken together, the evidence makes clear that whether whispered alone or spoken in unison, the act of talking to oneself is a common human resource. And once you view self-talk as a flexible tool rather than a fixed habit, another question emerges, not about whether people use it, but about how they use it most effectively when the stakes are high. That brings us back to the moments where performance, pressure, and focus collide, and where the strategies people choose reveal surprising similarities across very different settings. The successful user strategy. What links a child whispering through the steps of stacking blocks with an athlete before competition, or an executive rehearsing for a presentation? The setting may differ, but the mechanism is the same: strategic self-talk. What children stumble into instinctively, successful adults sharpen into a repeatable skill. Instead of letting words drift in and out, they select specific phrases designed to steady emotions, guide actions, and sustain focus. The difference is intentionality. Those at the top of their fields build structured routines around the words they use, turning inner dialogue into a performance tool rather than background noise. When you listen closely to how high achievers describe this practice, a pattern emerges. They don't speak in random bursts. They sort self-talk into categories, each with its own purpose. Broadly, researchers identify three: instructional, motivational, and reflective. Used together, these categories give the inner voice direction instead of leaving it to habitual rambling. The goal is not to silence the voice, but to assign it roles, the way you'd assign jobs on a team. Instructional, short technical cues that tell you exactly what to do. Examples include steady hand, focus on the first slide, or check the details. These show up whenever accuracy is non-negotiable. Surgeons narrating a procedure step, pilots reading back checklists, or athletes murmuring form cues before movement. The words cut out distractions by locking attention on the single action that matters most in that moment. Motivational, concise phrases that sustain energy and persistence. Examples include push through, stay with it, or you've got this. These don't refine technique. Instead, they refill resolve. Athletes tap them when fatigue bites, leaders use them before tense meetings, and entrepreneurs rely on them when the outcome is uncertain. They serve as sparks, providing the emotional drive to keep moving when stress or doubt threatens to slow momentum. Reflective, evaluative phrases used after the moment has passed. Examples include that idea connected, keep it, or organize that thought better next time. This type directs experience into learning, turning past performance into a template for the future. Many innovators blend reflective self-talk with journaling, speaking thoughts aloud as a way of consolidating memory and building stronger recall. Rather than recycling mistakes, these phrases convert recall into structured improvement. Successful individuals cycle between these three strategically. A golfer may reflect after a poor round, "I'm adjusting," then use instructional cues to refine form during practice and motivational bursts to push through late in competition. A CEO may reflect on a meeting before planning, shift to instructional language before presenting, and rely on motivational reminders to control nerves in front of an audience. The value lies not in any single type, but in knowing when each one is most effective. Structured interventions using this taxonomy show measurable payoffs. In sports psychology, athletes trained to apply specific cue words not only reported clearer focus, but also improved accuracy and endurance by margins large enough to influence outcomes. In professional domains, executives practicing structured routines, where they align instructional, motivational, and reflective talk before key events, demonstrated improved decision quality, reduced stress, and sharper presence in presentations. Research consistently notes low double-digit percentage improvements, underscoring that the shift shows up in data, not just in anecdotes. Examples ground this further. Justin Rose, a professional golfer, used focused language to maintain momentum despite challenges. His repeated phrases, "I'm getting better," and "I'm moving toward my goal," were not empty affirmations. They reframed setbacks into progress markers, keeping physiology calmer under pressure and helping redirect attention from error to growth. His mindset was shaped by words that turned frustration into steady composure, allowing performance to stabilize even when circumstances slipped. Performing artists show the same reliance. Before stepping on stage, actors often quietly run through instructional cues: slow pace, breathe between lines. These not only anchor delivery, but also ease fight or flight nerves. Motivational phrases provide bursts of energy when adrenaline spikes. Reflective talk after rehearsal sharpens future timing and presence. Though art seems spontaneous, performers maintain inner scripts to keep nerves from overriding craft. In entrepreneurship, pressure comes from volatility and constant change. Many founders adopt a cycle of pre-pitch self-talk, an instructional phrase to focus, a motivational line to maintain steadiness, and afterward a reflective note reinforcing what worked. "Stay steady through the pitch" precedes the event. That story resonated, keep it follows. These cues don't eliminate risk, but they regulate responses to it, preserving clarity in conditions designed to overwhelm. The core difference between passive and strategic self-talk is control. Left unchecked, the inner voice often repeats critique or anxiety. Directed with intention, it becomes a support system. Each phrase functions like a tool: map, spark, or review. Over time, and with repetition, the brain begins to anticipate these phrases automatically. What starts as deliberate practice transforms into a habit wired into routine, stabilizing actions without conscious strain. Practical implementation matters, and research offers repeatable methods. One simple routine is to build a 1-minute pre-performance script. Spend 20 seconds on physical regulations such as measured breathing, then insert a 20-second instructional cue that directs immediate focus, followed by a 20-second motivational line to energize persistence. Practiced in the same state as performance, a method known as state-dependent rehearsal. This approach embeds the routine, so it activates seamlessly when under stress. Such scripts provide structure that blocks random rumination and ensures the inner voice supports rather than sabotages. What unites these examples is adaptability. Whether the environment is a sports arena, a boardroom, or a stage, the task boils down to finding the right words and placing them at the right time. Instructional talk clarifies actions. Motivational talk pushes resilience. Reflective talk refines long-term growth. When combined into routines, the effect is magnified. Stress markers drop, focus sharpens, and decisions improve even under mounting pressure. The idea may feel deceptively simple, but its reach is wide. Self-talk trained into structure works as cognitive scaffolding, the brain's way of holding itself steady when complexity rises. Children lean on it naturally as they puzzle through problems, and top performers refine it into a reliable performance system. The continuity runs through everyday life as well. Many of us already whisper steps when cooking, mutter reminders before leaving the house, or talk through challenges at work without recognizing the function. Those same behaviors, once shaped deliberately, can become steadying rituals that improve both outcome and confidence. The lesson is not that high achievers are unusual for talking to themselves. The difference is that they have disciplined their language. Instead of drifting into self-criticism, they select instructional, motivational, and reflective words that match their goals. Research confirms the benefits, but practice locks them in. For anyone juggling tasks, stress, and ambition, the strategy is not to silence the inner voice but to train it, so that its content supports performance instead of undermining it. And this shift from happenstance to routine is what makes the practice transferable. It is not reserved for elite competitors or leaders. The same taxonomy and methods can be applied to any domain where pressure clouds clarity. The only requirement is to design a small set of phrases, align them with purpose, and give them regular rehearsal until they become automatic cues. Step by step, random muttering transforms into structured guidance that steadies thought and action under stress. The principle is clear. Successful people do not leave self-talk to chance. They shape it, categorize it, and use it with purpose. They treat words as part of their performance strategy. That structured habit provides stability across contexts: athletics, business, art, or innovation. It is less about what field you are in, and more about how you equip the inner voice to serve rather than distract. Which raises the next challenge: seeing how this principle applies not only to peak, high-pressure environments, but also to ordinary, everyday lives. The question is how to move from examples of professionals and research findings into routines anyone can use during daily stress and distraction. The answer lies in shifting from observing the science of self-talk to practicing it in the small, ordinary moments where it matters most. From science to daily life. Scientific findings only hold value if they can be used in the small, ordinary struggles most people face. The good news is that the same principles that help athletes or executives under pressure also apply in kitchens, classrooms, meetings, and commutes. The translation comes down to having a set of simple, repeatable scripts you can reach for in daily situations. 3 proven forms are especially useful in everyday life: structured self-talk for breaking down tasks, calming scripts for regulating stress, and cognitive restructuring for changing negative loops. Each has research support, each can be adapted quickly, and each becomes stronger through practice. Structured self-talk handles the problem of overload. When your working memory is crammed with competing signals, notifications, conversations, deadlines, spoken guidance steadies your focus. The technique is simple. Break down what you need to do into clear verbal steps. Example: Step 1, outline. Step 2, draft. Step 3, review. Saying the steps aloud creates audible checkpoints. Instead of juggling everything silently, you externalize the sequence into sound where it becomes easier to follow. Studies show this shift increases accuracy and reduces mistakes because your brain treats the words as anchors. Everyday uses are everywhere. Narrate steps while cooking a recipe, outline tasks while preparing a report, or guide yourself through studying one page at a time. What feels like a whisper of organization is actually a tool for reducing distraction and conserving mental energy. Calming scripts step in when stress threatens to overwhelm. A stressful meeting, heavy traffic, or looming deadline can flood the body with rapid breathing and tense muscles. A practiced phrase slows the reaction. Microscript: breathe in 4, out 6, one thing at a time. These aren't vague reassurances. They're specific cues that adjust both body and mind. Spoken slowly, the words signal your nervous system to match controlled breathing, lower cortisol spikes, and restore steady heart rhythms. Neuroscience studies show that compassionate or instructive phrases activate brain regions linked to safety and regulation, while harsh words trigger the same regions as physical pain. The physiological difference is real, and repeating a calm instruction reshapes the entire response in minutes. Using a short phrase makes it possible to shift from spiraling thought into regulation without needing long meditation sessions. Cognitive restructuring is the most direct way to change negative loops. Borrowed from cognitive behavioral therapy, it's a 3-step method for challenging inner criticism: name, frame, rewire. Example script: name it, that's my worry. Frame it, it's trying to protect me. Rewire, here's a realistic next step. By naming the thought, you break the trance of repetition. By framing it, you recognize the reason behind the thought, often fear or self-preservation. By rewiring it, you supply a balanced phrase that doesn't deny the problem, but makes it actionable. Over time, repetition builds alternative pathways in the brain, reducing the strength of default self-criticism. What first feels deliberate grows automatic. Instead of spiraling on, "I'll fail this," the trained response becomes, "I'm nervous, but I'll focus on the first step." Small replacements compound into durable patterns. Habits form more easily if practiced in low-stress contexts first. Trying to rewire your inner voice only when stress is at its peak is like trying to learn swimming during a storm. Start with easy places. Narrate simple steps during routine chores. Practice calming scripts while waiting for water to boil. Or test name-frame rewire with minor frustrations like misplacing keys. The repetition in these calm states lays tracks your brain returns to in harder situations. Researchers call this state-dependent practice, training in the same mental zone where you'll later need the technique. When stress arrives, your nervous system retrieves the practiced phrase automatically. Environmental anchors help repetition stick. Place a sticky note by your desk with one chosen phrase, or set a phone alarm labeled with a reminder like Step 1, Step 2, or Breathe 4 to 6. These cues act as rehearsal triggers, so self-talk is not left to chance. The more you link a phrase with a consistent situation, the faster it becomes second nature. Over weeks, an automatic association forms. Reaching a tough moment prompts the memory of the phrase without conscious effort. Anchored phrases become portable routines you can activate anytime. These 3 patterns, task breakdowns, calming scripts, and cognitive restructuring, also change neural responses both immediately and long-term. Spoken steps reduce overload right away. Calming scripts regulate heart rate and stress within minutes, and restructuring gradually rewire circuits across weeks, so negative thoughts lose their grip. The practical payoff is simple. Words you choose can shift physiology in the moment and shape automatic patterns over time. To show how this looks, imagine 3 everyday examples. You're writing a report and distraction rises. You say aloud, Step 1, outline. Step 2, draft. Step 3, review. You anchor focus and prevent drift. You're sitting in traffic and irritation spikes. A quiet, breathe in 4, out 6. One thing at a time pulls your nervous system from tension back to control. You're ruminating before a presentation. Name it, this is my worry. Frame it, it's trying to protect me. Rewire, I'll focus on the first talking point. Each is fast, clear, and repeatable. Nothing elaborate is required, only consistent use. Affirmations connected to goals overlap with this approach. Instead of broad generalities, I'm amazing. Focus on task-linked phrasing. Stay consistent with today's practice. Provides a specific target the brain recognizes. Research shows affirmations tied to immediate behavior strengthen motivation and make progress feel rewarding. The brain's reward pathways respond more robustly when cues link to clear goals. Over time, the association between words and action reinforces habits. Practice leads to follow-through not by magic, but by repetition linking language to felt outcomes. The practical key is to start smaller than most people assume. You don't need a complete script for every part of the day. One clear phrase before a meeting, one calming breath phrase in traffic, or one reframed thought before a challenging task is enough to begin. These micro-practices build confidence and naturalness. Once familiar, you expand by layering them into routines. A 3-step checklist before starting work, a calming phrase tied to exercise, or nightly reflection using name-frame rewire. The architecture builds slowly until self-talk becomes trained instead of random. At that point, what once felt forced begins to feel like habit. Because of neuroplasticity, the brain grows new automatic responses that carry emotionally lighter weight. Instead of harsh critique, the expectation becomes guidance. Instead of spiraling rumination, your voice defaults to redirection. The methods are not dramatic, but their cumulative effect is. Regular use lowers stress, sharpens focus, and makes effort feel sustainable. It is the accumulation of many small scripts, repeated across hundreds of ordinary situations, that changes the baseline of inner dialogue. Consider how people often ignore these opportunities. Stress builds, distraction grows, and the inner voice defaults to judgment. Without structure, the critic gains the microphone. With structure, your self-talk works on your behalf. Saying steps aloud cuts confusion. A steady breathing phrase quiets adrenaline. A reframed thought blocks the loop of rumination. These aren't personality traits. They are trained habits. And they open a path away from being controlled by thoughts and toward guiding them with intention. Making the practice practical also means adapting it to your environment. In the workplace, structured steps help manage long to-do lists. At home, calming scripts ease chaotic family moments. In study contexts, cognitive restructuring helps block self-doubt. The versatility is striking because the underlying process never changes. Language is treated as action, not noise. Speaking words give structure, rewires feedback, and steadies the nervous system. People who adopt the habit report not only reduce stress, but also more enjoyment in focused moments, because the chatter is shaped instead of chaotic. The future orientation created by affirmations and structured scripts gives people a sense of progress. Instead of fear-dominating thought, language fills that space with preparation. Words literally direct attention to controllable actions and calmer body states. Each small practice grounds you in now, while repeating phrases aimed at goals quietly shapes both motivation and resilience across weeks. The voice in your head doesn't just narrate life, it steers it. The real shift comes with the recognition that you don't need ideal circumstances or laboratory precision to benefit. You need only to commit to a handful of short scripts and attach them to ordinary moments. In quiet repetition, they rewire patterns of thought and stress. And day by day, they turn an unreliable monologue into a steady guide that works alongside your goals instead of against them. Ultimately, Applying science to daily life with self-talk is about control. Not full control over circumstances, but better control over your mental response. And once you see the effect in simple places, a calmer commute, a more focused work session, it becomes clear that this ability scales into more demanding settings too. Strategic self-talk is not theory left on paper. It is a working tool for personal regulation that anyone can carry. The point is not to make your inner dialogue vanish, but to design it so it serves purpose instead of sabotage. Structured steps, calming scripts, and reframed thoughts are small, accessible routines that prove language shapes both mind and body. Practice any one of them, and the shift becomes visible. Lighter stress, clearer thinking, steadier focus. These aren't abstract claims. They're everyday skills waiting to be applied. And when you see self-talk functioning this way, it changes the entire framing. What once seemed quirky turns out to be an embedded system. An internal process the brain is designed to rely on for stability and growth. From there, it becomes easier to see the larger point. The inner voice isn't just background chatter. It's one of the brain's core strategies for guiding attention, regulating emotion, and shaping decisions. Self-talk is not background chatter. It's a trainable tool grounded in neuroscience and therapy research. The evidence shows it shapes physiology in the moment and rewires patterns across weeks, which means the way you phrase things really matters. So try it today. Use one microscript, a step-by-step cue, a calming phrase, or a reframed thought, and see how it shifts your focus or stress. Then drop your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear what worked for you. And if this gave you something useful, hit like and subscribe for more practical mind hacks. Straightforward tools, not vague fluff.